So that this is essentially like a proof of concept of what you could do, melting them and extruding them at a really, into a really thick filament. So this,
Yeah.
I think the tip on there is really small, but it goes up to half an inch. So you can extrude a half-inch extrusion of melted plastic, and the ring around it cools it off really quickly, so it can, it can hold itself in the air.
Showing you the video of say
Yeah.
we're using it here. So you can see that the tool like extrudes plastic but also cools it so that it can make for the standing like human scale 3D structure, which is really impressive that you're able to time the cooling down of the plastic, with it extruding.
Yeah, but yeah, it's very slow. This is like it's a time lapse. So I don't know if you can tell, but it's a pretty tiring machine to handle.
Mm-hmm.
So actually, a lot of the artifacts that I've made off of this machine ended up having the machine on the table, extruding at my hands, but it'd be cold enough to touch, so I can just like handle it with my bare hands as it comes out of the machine, and I'd make these like weird loopy candy looking things.
I
Yeah.
I think I read that just as you mentioned, like this tool is pretty heavy. I think I read in an interview or something that you were thinking of maybe attaching it to a robotic arm to see if it would be easier to
Yeah.
handle like that. Have you had a
Yeah, we've
chance to
done
try
it.
that out?
Yeah, so at Pratt they have a bunch of robot arms. And my friend Ezio runs a class where he teaches robotics and fabrication. So I actually loaned the machine to him so that he could run it in his class with his students. And they made some pretty cool, very well controlled extrusions with the robot.
Very
Yeah.
cool. So this was made at this, as I mentioned, it was an artist residency sponsored by Autodesk, and it was in
Hmm.
2015, am I right?
Yeah, 2015.
So I guess I wanted
Yeah.
to ask like how the experience of making this tool informed your coming practice, because I imagine that you had access to all these fabrication tools that probably were not readily available in 2015. Like I barely knew what a
Yeah.
3D printer was in 2015.
Yeah, Pier 9, people that know us, we talk about it a lot. It's this kind of magical workshop that's on a pier. So it's literally on the water facing the bay in San Francisco. And they have some of the best machines in that shop, the best machines and the best staff. So it's not just like really good machines, but actually this incredible staff that helps you learn how to run the machines. Doesn't, I've experienced lots of shops where you kind of feel like an idiot, the first time you walk in because everybody else knows how to do things and you don't know how to do things and they make you feel stupid for doing things wrong. It's the opposite. Pier 9 is like, here's a bunch of machines. Here's how you run the machine. And they're like, go for it. Just, break it. And if you break it, just tell us. And they're like so chill about it. And so, yeah, I got to run basically every machine they have there, minus maybe the 5-axis DMS. They have a huge, it's like a 8-foot cubic volume CNC mill that I didn't run, but everything else I did. And after that, I was like, in our practice, we were like, we need a similar type setup where, you know, I can come up with an idea at night, sketch it, CAD it up, and then in the morning, just have every file ready to go to fabricate it. And then by lunchtime, I would have a finished prototype. That's sort of the cycle that we had at Pier 9. And so after we left, we're like, we really need to figure out how to make that work. And so that's how I ended up with this workshop that's like a miniature version of Pier 9, minus the
Yeah,
lovely staff.
that's amazing. We'll talk more about your workshop shortly, and maybe you can even show us a little bit of it since you're there. But
Yeah.
for now, I just want to mention the other work you have on display in Artist Tools, which I believe that you made in the actual workshop you're sitting in, right? So
Yes.
this is the Carbide Ring. Maybe you
Uh-huh.
can tell us, it's very different in scale from the hot plastic gun, but still
Yeah.
very interesting. And like, I feel like it speaks to a lot of the principles of CW&T. So perhaps you could tell us a bit about this tool.
Sure. Yeah. So this is another idea that it's been floating in my head for a while. of having, I really like these little, I have a different one here. These are like these are tools for turning on a lathe, so
Mm-hmm.
metal cutting tools. And these are made out of carbide, which are super strong, like incredibly tough material. And I thought, part of my head was like, oh, why don't we treat it like a diamond, like it's precious? Because people think diamonds are so beautiful because they're so, they're like tough and last forever. I'm like, so does
Yeah.
carbide. And then I really like the idea of having a marking tool with me at all times. So being able to mark pretty much any material that you can find. So,
Yeah.
this will cut into glass, it'll cut into metal, I don't know, rocks, whatever you want.
You
Yeah.
leave your mark on anything. Yeah. So the show that they're in is all for like tools made by artists for use in everyday life or in their practice. So these tools like fit the theme perfectly. Like we were so excited when you submitted to it. And maybe so as I mentioned, like especially the Carbide Ring, I feel even though it's so simple, it speaks to themes that I see in CW&T. Like you're this smaller studio working from home and you have your practice in your basement and then like you live upstairs, and I guess that perhaps I wanted you to speak a bit to the principles of CW&T, which seems that
Mhm.
there's something you try to stay true to, and perhaps also have like developed over time. Could you talk a bit about this?
Sure. Yeah. So we have a bunch of principles. I think there's maybe 9 or 10 of them that we wrote about a few years ago. So our studio is 9 years old now. No, 10 years old, a little over 10 years old. But it wasn't until maybe 2 or 3 years ago that we realized we do have a set of principles that we abide by.
Mm-hmm.
And so we wrote them down. And, some of them are we hold really dearly to, like, as a business, we're really not trying to become a big company. We're really just two people. We sometimes have interns. Our friend YJ helps us with assembly a few days a week. We're really not trying to become a giant company. We really like staying small. There's less overhead. We get to design in a different way when less people are involved. So, yeah, we're really interested in like what we can do sustainably as a small company. Um, yeah, I forget what other principles.
We'll
Uh,
get more into the.
yeah.
I have some that I'm gonna ask you like specifically about
Okay.
too. So
Yeah.
don't worry if you can't list all of them right now. But I thought that since we're talking about the practice, I can show some of
Mm,
your work that's like quite
sure.
recent and that caught my eye. So this is the solid state watch. I hope people can
Ooh,
see
yeah.
it. It's like it has this element. Of course, it's a watch, so it's related to time, which is something I've seen a lot of your work, but. Perhaps you can talk more about the specific project and like what it is, because it looks really cool, but it's more interesting when you know like the thought behind it and especially the process and how it's made.
Sure. So this is kind of like an homage to the Casio F91W. It's like the most ubiquitous watch in the world, maybe.
Yeah, I have
Uh,
one.
almost everybody has one because they're cheap. It's really cheap and it keeps time really accurately, better than most mechanical watches. And so, we wanted to basically we love that watch. I used to wear it, and when we've been designing watches for a while. We've never published one, but
Mhm.
I've designed my own watches out of other movements, and we thought, it's about time we maybe make a watch. And so when we did, we landed on using the F91W, and then there were all these issues around like, oh, do we make it waterproof? How waterproof do we make it? How do you make buttons around it? Which, I've made a bunch of watches with, proper waterproofing buttons and like all these complications. And then in the end, we're just like, why don't we just cast it into resin? Like, let it just be what it is, and just like cast it in, almost like how insects get caught in amber,
Yeah, I have a
and they just
video.
stay that way for thousands of years.
Yeah.
So yeah, so now what we do, the video shows it. We basically just take the movement, sink it into resin, and then just cure it so that it can never be adjusted. So you can't adjust the time. Yeah, you can't change the battery.
Yeah, I
It'll
like
just
that.
run for, it should run for about 13 years on this battery, which is also kind of like a magical feat of engineering.
I'm sorry.
Um, so yeah, I like the idea that, it's gonna just tell the time. It doesn't do anything else, even though the watch originally has all these other functions. And it will also drift over time. Like, most watches, are not super accurate. Like, even though they're super accurate, it still drifts. So you kind of have to adjust it over time. So this one, you can't adjust. And so over your 10 years, you'll see it might drift 10, 15 minutes, maybe even 30 minutes at most.
Yeah,
But yeah, that's kind of the life of the watch.
it's very interesting because we're all like obeying time always, it determines everything we do and when we do it. But I like that you kind of let it have its own course with this project.
Yeah.
So CW&T, you have your practice divided into like hard and soft relates to software. And I saw this other project that is software based called Earth Clock that's also related to time that I'm going to show a little video over here. And perhaps you can also tell the audience about this. And if anyone has any questions, like feel free to ask them in the comments.
Yeah, feel free to ask. I see
Yeah.
some friends on here. So this is Earth Clock. It's basically a digital clock made out of different places on Earth that look like numbers. So so there's a building that looks like a 1, a 3, a couple islands that look like a colon, a stadium that's a 0. Yeah, so it's like I thought it would be a cool way to make, I thought, I was just like, I want to use Google Earth and make a clock out of it. So, there's no machine learning or AI on this. This is pre-machine learning. All these places are found manually by me originally. But now there's a website. If you go to earthclock.cwnt.com, you can actually help me find places and contribute to the database. And so now there's, I think about 1,000 places on Earth that have been cataloged to look like different numbers, and the clock just cycles through all of those places.
Very cool. And you can also get a free screensaver of this at CW&T, I think. So people should head over there.
I don't know if it still works, but
I hope so.
Yeah.
I guess I wanted to ask you like where this interest in time comes from, because I saw that you also did your master's thesis at ITP at NYU, which is where you also met Taylor, like your partner in life and partner in work and everything. You did your master's kind of like warping it. You've always been interested in?
Yeah. I think when I was a kid, I just liked watches. Like watches were interesting to me because they had all these little, mechanical parts moving and they just magically work somehow. And then when I got older, as I was thinking about what to do for thesis, which I think every student maybe goes through, where you're like, oh, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
Like, what's my, thing? Taylor actually suggested you should just make a bunch of timekeeping devices because that's what you like to think about and do. And I was like, oh, okay. Because most people's theses are like a project. They're like, I'm going to make this grand thing. And I couldn't come up with the grand thing. So I was like, I'll make a bunch of things. And so I made 6 different timekeeping or time-related devices. But I actually did that twice. I did that once at ITP. Where I met Taylor, and then we both also went to MIT, where I did another master's degree, and that was also in timekeeping.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So a question that kind of just comes to me naturally here from, us doing this interview under these circumstances is like, how are you thinking of time in quarantine? Because some people are saying like it's just going on endlessly and every day feels like a Thursday. Like, how does it feel to you, and how does it impact your work?
I definitely lose track of time. I think, it's like a common feeling to be like, is it Tuesday today? It's Tuesday. Yeah, today is Tuesday. But and then it's like, today feels like a Friday, but it's actually Monday. Like that feeling, I think we're all sharing. And, this is just my thinking. I've been thinking about it. I'm like, there are going to be some significant shifts in how society works after all of this, because of all the things, but also because of the way our sense of time is changing. Like that is affecting everybody. And I think that I don't know what's gonna happen, but I feel like something's gonna be different in the way we think about time, in the way we share time and talk about time after all of this.
Yeah,
So that's partly exciting and partly I'm just like curious what's gonna happen.
definitely like pace of life has slowed down so much. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
I have both more and fewer hours of the day. Every day feels like it shifts.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
because you have this like developed home studio like that's in your basement along with your laundry room, I heard, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know how impacted is your like physical work and your manufacturing by
Mm.
quarantine. Like, are you available to like, can you do everything from home, or do you need to outsource?
Yeah, we pretty much, in terms of our practice and access to tools and stuff, we have the same thing. So I think we're incredibly fortunate to have this setup where, yeah, all our work machines and everything is in our basement. We have a small clean studio upstairs. But we're primarily impacted by daycare. Like we have two kids
Yeah, two young
running
children.
around all day long. And so, most of my work happens at night. So after the kids go to bed, I come down here and just try to cram a bunch of work between 9 and midnight or whenever I get tired.
Damn.
But yeah,
Yeah, I
we're
mean,
still working really hard.
so you were able to kind of have a like freer practice from out of your home after kind of a big shift in your studio practice, which I believe happened in 2011. And this kind of also relates to
Mm,
time because that's when you started, or you tried out Kickstarter, which is this
yeah,
large crowdfunding platform, and you have to like fund money for your project within a certain amount of time, I think.
yeah,
And you guys launched Pen Type A, which allowed for you to do this thing where you like are a family and work from home and take on your
yeah,
own projects. I'll show Pen Type A here. This is the pen that changed everything for
yeah.
CWT.
Uh-huh.
Can you tell us a bit about this and how it shifted
Yeah,
the
that was a
course?
pretty, as far as our studio goes and the way we approach our business, I guess, a lot shifted in 2011. So, Kickstarter only started in 2009, I believe. And so it's still very early. And I think we were just in the right place at the right time. Like,
Hmm.
I love this product, but I can't imagine if we launched this product today, it would get the kind of attention we got in 2011. But back then, there weren't that many products on Kickstarter. There were certainly no pens on Kickstarter, if you can imagine it, because there's so many pens now on Kickstarter. But so we got a lot of attention just for being there being early, and we, at the time, it was a really big campaign, and so it completely shifted our practice from writing software for clients, which we did a lot of, to thinking, kind of imagining a future in our studio where we could make the things that we wanted for ourselves, whether that's software or hardware, and finding people on the internet that are willing to, buy it or support our work directly. And that was really game changing, life changing.
Yeah, that's so
And so
cool.
since then, that's what we've been doing.
Yeah, it's so cool. I remember when I started design school in 2015, our teachers always talked to us about like the wonder of Kickstarter. But
Mm,
it even felt like in 2015 that it was a bit late. Like there were so many projects, so you really
mm.
like benefited from the timing there.
Yeah,
And then you made some
yeah,
more pens after Pen Type A, right? But you don't want
yeah.
to be known as a pen designer.
I just don't think we are pen designers. There are people who are out there that are pen designers, and I have a lot of respect for them because it's a craft and a passion that is needed to really go deep into this stuff. We're kind of just we appreciate design, we appreciate pens, but we're interested in designing many other things. And so even though we've made a lot of pens, I think we are, we've said we're done making pens a few times, but I think we are really actually done making pens.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's good. Well, I mean, a pen, I mean, since we are talking about tools, like I feel like a pen is
Right.
a very important tool, like in that if you are an artist or a designer, you use it daily, and like having a pen that flows well can help your workflow. Like if you are limited in your pen usage, it honestly inhibits some things. But
Yeah.
I guess I wanted to, so this is pen type A. It has this like ruler sleeve. And then I'm gonna show a picture of pen type B here because whilst you don't want to be known as a pen designer, there is something in this project that I wanted to ask you about. And so this pen type B has a sleeve that you can see here that fits it very snugly and kind of glides onto the pen with like a pneumatic seal. And a concept that you speak a lot about in the like project description of this pen, and also sometimes in your practice, is like the idea of something being over designed or over engineered, which just intuitively sounds like a negative thing, but to you it is a positive thing. And I'm wondering if you can talk about that.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I think our desire, yeah, I get, when we say over engineered, in my head it's a positive thing, but I can see how, yeah, in most contexts it probably means a negative thing. But the way we mean it, it's like so many of our products today are engineered for manufacturing, optimizing it to use the least amount of material or just the right amount of material so it doesn't break, changing aspects of the design so that it's easier to manufacture, cheaper to manufacture. And we feel and we felt and we feel like that's not the appropriate way to design everything. Some things obviously it makes sense, but like when it comes to pen, for example, I don't want a pen that is only going to last a week, or like, yeah, I want a pen, there's no reason a pen shouldn't last multiple generations. And so that's what we mean by over engineered. It's like we're trying to fight the stream of design objects that are not thinking about making it last forever and thinking about making it last just long enough. Like I think I talk about hard drives a lot. I don't know if everyone's probably experienced this where you buy a hard drive for your computer back in the day when they were spinning disks, and it literally breaks a couple days before the warranty expires. Like that's how good, design for manufacturers. Like people are, engineers are so good at optimizing. They can optimize it to break a few days before your warranty expires or after your warranty expires. And I'm just like, that's so shitty. Like I don't want to participate in that kind of design. And so we're always trying to fight that, and it's hard because things become really expensive to make, but we find it's worth it.
Yeah, something that's I've seen that is one of your principles is CW&T makes things that last forever. And it's like a very noble thought and noble mission to make things with that in mind, I feel.
Yeah, we try. But it's hard, I think because it costs money to make things. So like I think a lot of people see our stuff and they're like, man, that's really expensive. But we're also like, man, that's really expensive to make. And oftentimes we're like, I don't know if anyone's gonna want to buy this thing. It's so expensive. But then, we realize maybe, out of the whatever 6-7 billion people on the planet, maybe we can find a few people that appreciate it or think it's worth spending extra money to make to buy something that lasts longer than it was meant to last.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like the fact that it is like how you describe it, over-engineered, is like reassuring that people have put this thought into the product I'm gonna buy. Like for me to have it forever, I like that thought a lot. And if we perhaps we can talk a bit about also what you do outside of CW&T, because you teach architecture at Pratt, and I saw that you got your BFA in architecture. And sometimes it's like you get your BFA in something, but then you realize you want to work with something else, but you've kind of gone full circle, like back to architecture and also back to the same school.
Right. Well, I mean, I think I always had my foot in there, so I never really left architecture. Um, I was lucky enough to start teaching just 2 years after I graduated.
Wow.
So similar, like I was at the right place at the right time. I didn't have my master's degree, but my mentor basically was like, "Do you want to come teach, even though you have zero teaching experience and you just graduated?" And I was like, "Okay." And so he let me teach, and I learned to teach on the job. And so, I've been teaching since 2005. And so I never really left teaching or never left the architecture world, but our practice has kind of shifted around, to like writing software, to making products. And, once in a while we'll design buildings, but, I've always had my foot, I'm still always invested in architecture. And I think the architectural education is actually incredibly, it's a really good education. Like, I feel like a lot of what I learned applies to the things I do now, even though they're not directly related to architecture. So I value it a lot. So I like to teach it and give back to the school.
That's cool. I guess because one of the principles of CW&T I saw is that it's like make things straight away or make them in the scale that they are going to be used in. Like, it's like do not render too much because
Right. Yeah.
I wanted to know how you think about this in relation to just working with both architecture and product design, because in architecture,
Right.
obviously you can't like see the house you're going to make before it's built, but product design you can make a model really fast. Like, how's that going?
Yeah, so I mean, it's funny because when I graduated from architecture school is right around the time where rendering was becoming a thing. Like, while I was in school, computer aided modeling, CAD, was just starting to become a thing. Like, nobody was teaching it, and I had to learn it on my own. By my last year, maybe there were 1 or 2 classes in it. But I was lucky enough that I learned how to render stuff well enough that I got a lot of work rendering things. Because I spent a lot of times, maybe 4 or 5 years in the architecture world doing a lot of rendering work in offices. But then, as I was tinkering with industrial design on the side, I realized rendering is not good for everything. Like I see a lot of really nice renderings these days because it's really easy to render stuff. And you can't tell the difference between a really nicely photographed product versus a rendered product.
Yeah.
Because they're both trying to look like each other sometimes. Because the photographer's trying to make something look so clean that it looks like it's a rendering, and sometimes people rendering are trying to just like putting a little bit of fuzziness or like a little bit of dirt to make sure it doesn't look too polished, but it still looks really polished. And I'm just like, for me, it fulfills the sense that you've made the thing, which I think is quite dangerous. It's like, I mean, it's maybe just my own feeling, but like when I make a rendering, I'm like, oh, I worked it all out and I finished the design, and then I don't have enough motivation to continue with the project and actually work it out, like work out how to functionally make it work. And so for me, I avoid it at all costs. Like I avoid it unless I have to render it to like, I don't know, show someone to prove some idea or to get funding or something like that. But if I'm doing a project on my own, I make sure I don't render it so that I don't feed this like desire in my brain to like see the finished thing until I actually make the finished thing.
Yeah, that is some knowledge for every product designer or aspiring product designer.
Yeah, rendering is crap. Don't do it too much.
Yeah, I mean, because people worry about their render skills. But so in architecture, I believe that you teach inflatables and morphology. And at least with inflatables, it's like you can actually see the thing before you make it. Which is an interesting kind of section of architecture, I feel.
Yeah, that's why I love teaching inflatables so much. Like when I teach an inflatable studio, we don't render anything. We use the computer only to make templates. That's it. And so everything is done by intuition and experimentation, which I think is so much more, you learn a lot more from that. Like you learn from the mistakes because it either inflates or it doesn't, or it either inflates in the way you predicted or it doesn't. Versus like when you work on a computer, you can just like force it to look a certain way. There's no correlation between like whether it'll stand up later or whether a person can actually fit in there. Like none of those things can actually be worked out properly. So I really love, working hands-on at large scales when I teach.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I mean, I just imagine that if it's something that you inhabit or need to step into, like experiencing it is so important.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, it's super fun. I highly recommend it. It's so easy to make inflatables. I feel like everybody should just go do it. It's so easy.
yeah, you can do it at home with like a flat iron, I think, if you just have the
Yeah,
right plastic. I
you don't even need a flat iron. You need box tape and painter's tarp, like LDPE painter's tarp, which you can buy at Home Depot in bulk for really cheap, and box tape. That's all you need, and a blade to cut it.
Okay, we all know what we're gonna experiment with in quarantine now. That's great. So I guess speaking of inventive tools like using painter's tarp and box tape, do you have a favorite tool or something that you use a lot in your studio that just like become very useful to you?
Yes, there are a few things that I carry in my pocket every day. People love everyday carry things, but I literally carry these things. This is our own product, so plugging my own shit. But this is Pen Type C. I carry this everywhere, every day, so that I can have a tool to write with. This is the other thing I carry every day is a Deco color pen. This is the best paint pen. Sorry, Sharpie. I know everyone loves Sharpies, and I have Sharpies, but if you draw a line with this next to a Sharpie, it makes a Sharpie look terrible. So
Oh, wow.
if you like paint pens, this is the one to get. And the last one that I carry, the other thing I carry, is one of these. This is also our own product, but we haven't launched this yet. It's called a Herringblade.
Mm-hmm.
So it's basically a box cutter, but before this, I had a really chunky one that I like. I forget the name of the company, but it holds 6 blades in one, which I love because I love the snap-off blades
Yeah.
because you can have a sharp blade, which I think is really important for cutting if you like cutting things properly. So we basically made a super thin box 18 millimeter blade holder.
Mm-hmm.
We also made these custom notches on it. So yeah, it comes with these tiny notches that allow this thing to lock in.
And that's where the herring reference comes from, right? So this is the Herringblade by
Yes,
CWT. Yeah, it looks like the
herring
bones
blade.
in a fish.
Yeah, so here's another one. So we're making these out of titanium and aluminum, and we're making lefty versions and righty versions, which I thought was like a missing thing, missing gap in the blade world. A
Are
lot of
you
them are just
left-handed?
righty. I'm not, but our oldest son is, and we noticed, we let him cut with these massive blades, and he's like holding it in such an awkward way. So we're gonna make lefty versions of this also.
Well, I mean, that's great. I know that you CWNT has released like a series of your favorite things too, called The Ones, which is
Yeah,
all your best projects and recommendations that everyone can see if you go to CWNT's Instagram, which is Charlie Whiskey Tango, that Che-Wei is joining me from now. If you click the link in bio, you can see all the tools and products they recommend. So I encourage
yeah,
you all to do
we
that.
like things, like I'm not a huge proponent, I'm not like a big shopper, but when we buy things, we like to buy the best that we can afford, because, it really sucks. I think the thing that people maybe often don't take into account is like when you buy things, you also have to get rid of it at some point. Like
Yeah, for
it,
sure.
unless it literally lasts forever, it's like you have to either someone's paying a price to throw that in the garbage. Even if you're just throwing it in the garbage, someone else is paying the price for that thing. And so we really are very careful about things we acquire, knowing, thinking about how long it's going to last, how is it going to leave our life when we're done with it or when it breaks. Or when it breaks, can we fix it? Like, all these things we take into account. We're kind of obsessive about this, so we made a list of our favorite things because we just wanted to highlight it and share those things.
Yeah, so I recommend you all to check that out. CWNT's bio on Instagram. But besides buying things, I know that you also make some tools. Like you kind of have the fabrication tools to modify your tools or make tools in your shop. But I was especially interested in this thing that you made a little while back, I believe, called the RotoJam machine. That was used to make bowls called RotoJams, and the bowls look like this. They're like very fragile plaster bowls. But I wanted to ask more about the machine you made to make them, which looks like, oh, it's kind of a big picture, which looks like this.
Yeah.
Could you tell us a bit about this and what it is?
Sure. Yeah. So this is yeah, I don't know why I didn't think of submitting this to you guys. It's kind of it's a full fabrication process built into a single machine. So this is a rotating head with a vacuum inside it. So that white part is it's a weather balloon filled with, I think, marbles here. So you fill a weather balloon with marbles, you plug it into this machine, and it pulls a half vacuum so that you can sort of shape it like it's clay. And then when you're finished shaping it, you can turn the vacuum all the way up and it pulls a full vacuum. So then it's really hard, so you can't shake it around anymore or manipulate it. And then you pour this like super fast curing plaster called dry stone.
Oh yeah, I've used dry stone, yeah.
Yeah, dry stone's amazing. It's magic.
It's very hard, like very difficult.
Yeah, it's super hard, super fine grain, and very fast curing. So we pour this in, and this machine basically rotates it, but you can program how it rotates. So if your mold is like perfectly cylindrical, you probably just want to spin it to get the material all spread out. But since these are shaped by hand, you don't want the material to go everywhere. Some parts need more material and other parts need less material, especially if the plaster is very viscous. So the way you program this is you hold a button and you kind of rotate it manually. And so you position it into all the positions you want it to be in and how long you want it to be in those positions. And then when you let go of the button, it'll just repeat that motion over and over. So it's sort of like programming a robot to like swirl in a very specific way, and then it'll just like repeat that motion over and over.
That's so cool. And I think that this like top part, which is what you made, it's attached to a tripod, right? Like a camera tripod. Yeah, which I really like the idea of utilizing something.
Yeah, we have a lot of these tripods because they're so good. They're like old style tripod-y. They don't have any fancy. It's not. It's made out of aluminum. It's not super fancy. It's not really expensive either. So we use it for all kinds of things in our house.
Cool. And this is what the finished product of the RotoJam machine looks like. So these are like plaster bowls, and the imprint fluctuates with whatever granular material you put into this weather balloon, right? Yeah, it's really cool. And I think I saw a picture where it's also used as a seat, like a stool.
Yes, we made a stool out of this. Yeah, it's quite strong. Dry stone's really, really strong. And the stool, we use burlap also. So plaster is really good in compression, but it's quite brittle. But if you make a composite, so if you mix the dry stone with any kind of fibrous material, it could be cotton. We use burlap because it's super cheap. And you mix the two, so it's like a sheet of burlap with plaster, it becomes insanely strong. Like you can make some, crazy strong stuff.
Yeah, so many materials, they're interesting. So we have an hour allotted for this interview, and we actually have some questions that were submitted beforehand that I thought maybe I should get to so that we make sure to get to them. So we have a question from Joanne Chen, who is a newly graduated product designer. Joanne is wondering, because Joanne's like a fan of CWNT, and like your whole thing is that you're this family practice. So Joanne is wondering if you want your kids to grow up to become product designers.
Yes, of course. I feel like every parent wants their kids to like continue whatever their practice is. But I'm also very cautious to not overdo it because then they'll rebel and not want to do it. But I think being creative is something. It's just like a human thing. So I'm less trying to just be like, I'm not trying to train them to do anything. I'm just trying to get them to be interested in making, and like drawing and sculpting and like also just coming up with crazy ideas. So we do a lot of that in our house. It's like a lot of sketching and coming up with ideas and playing with words and playing with materials.
Yeah, because they're very young, and I mean, just
Yeah,
from you doing the live from your studio, which is also your basement and laundry room, like seems like they're growing up very much, like even literally in design, like in the studio
right.
environment, which is interesting.
Yeah, sometimes they say things where I'm like, you obviously don't know how other families are. Like they'll be like, oh, we should just 3D print that. I'm like, yeah, in our house you could do that, but like not everybody gets to do it that way. Or he's like, go machine that thing so that we could fix this. I'm like, okay, but just so you know, it's like not everybody's house is like this.
That's good that you're bracing them for the future outside of design. Then we also have a question from Fabiola Lopez. Fabiola is wondering if you could redesign anything, what would you redesign? It's quite a big question.
Oh, that's a really big question.
Yeah, take some time.
Um, I don't know. I don't have a really good answer for it, but there is a project I'm super excited about right now, which is I am designing a watch for outer space. So astronauts normally, most astronauts now wear a, uh, is it an Omega? I forget which company makes it, but it's a watch made for Earth
Mhm.
that's been tested and it's all approved to go to space. And so it just seems weird that everything else is designed from scratch to be used in outer space, but astronauts are still wearing Earth watches to wear in outer space. So that felt weird. And, I have a part-time day job working for the space initiative at MIT.
Cool.
And so one of the projects I'm starting up there is to design a watch for astronauts.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, just what comes to mind when you say that is like how the fact that time is different in space and different
Yeah,
planets.
yeah. I just had a conversation, yeah, actually, yeah, last week I had a talk with an astronaut, which went so well. Like I learned so much from talking. It's amazing what you can get out of talking to a person. There's a lot of documentation online about like what watches astronauts have worn and like the history of watches in space, but like actually talking to an astronaut who's been to space multiple times, has experienced the difference in time and space was amazing. Like we came up with some cool ideas for a watch. So hopefully, yeah, in the next few years we'll get this watch out.
Sounds really exciting. I mean, good luck with that. I mean, talking to an astronaut, that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Um, I guess that a final question that I have for you would perhaps be, how you're going to continue working with these themes moving forward in quarantine, or like if you're hoping that it'll come to a stop soon, or if it's just going well, like thinking about time, thinking about manufacturing, using your home studio, like is it good, or do you want it to stop?
I definitely want it to stop. Um, I don't know. I feel like it's the things that I think about more are around teaching and our whole situation. Like it's really dramatically changed how we teach and how students learn. And, a lot of my time is spent thinking about that stuff. In terms of our practice and making things, I feel like we're actually not as affected,
Oh,
because we still get to make stuff. We have manufacturers that are back online now and they're making stuff for us and shipping, even though it's a little bit difficult, it's still working. So yeah, that stuff I'm not as worried about and hasn't changed that much, but teaching has really shifted a lot. And everyone's still, things about what's going to happen this coming fall are still unknown. Like a lot of places haven't decided whether they're going to open or not, or half open, or any of that. So yeah, I hope we can all be in person again. Like I really miss teaching in person. There's so much we can't do over video. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing students again in person.
Yeah, of course. And we're hoping that we can open artist tools so you can come see Che-Wei's tools. You can come see the hot plastic glue gun in person and the mark making ring. But until then, you can check them out on our website, specialspecial.com. And I guess I wanted to just end this interview, which it's been a delight, like having some insight into your practice and work. I wanted to end it just by mentioning, now that we're talking about teaching, the class you're teaching at School for Poetic Computation the coming semester, because that's all online, right?
Yeah. So we've been preparing to shift our class. So we teach a electronics and hardware class that's normally taught in person, but now we've dramatically shifted it to be possible to teach online, which at first I was hesitant because I was like, that's not really a class we want to be teaching online. But Taylor, my partner, she's been putting so much work into this and making it, I think it's going to be a really good experience actually to learn this online because of the way she's prepared it. She's doing the electronics part and I do the motors and mechanisms part. So I think, it's partly an experiment. We don't know if it'll be great, but for sure we're putting a lot of work into it. So hopefully the outcome, it shows in the class. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, and it's called Poetic Hardware, right? At the School for Poetic Computation. You can also check that out and see WNT's bio along with their favorite products. And yeah, stay tuned for more pictures and content from Artist Tools of Che-Wei's work. And I kind of just want to thank you for having this interview. It's coming to an end. So
thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
I want to tell everybody how prepared Ellen was for this. Like I've never, I've been to other interviews, but man, you are so prepared. She did like a deep dig in everything about me, and I was like, wow, she actually did her homework. So it was a pleasure talking to you.
It's been a pleasure looking into your practice. Thank you so much. And
thank you.